And hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 369. I am your host, Lauren Gray, and it is September 2022, which means we are in the middle of our happy hospitality budgeting season. Yes, we have had continued conversations as to the budgeting process. I find it interesting to be focused on this right now because this is our first real test of forecasting skill and prowess. Uh, Last year we had a mea culpa, like, okay, look, we have no idea how much COVID will continue to impact our business demands to market. Yes, we had an amazing summer last year, a tsunami summer of an unexpected, unprecedented, wow, let's throw that word in there, demand to a variety of markets. And we charged exorbitant fees and destroyed our service credibility and didn't have enough people to do what we were supposed to do, but charged money anyway. And lots of services weren't open. And then we had another resurgence of people that got sick. And here we are now, where studies have shown that the anxiety associated, the apprehension, the concern about COVID has been cut in half since the beginning of the year. January, there was 48% of people in the United States, and I think this domestically. Um, for our international friends, my apologies, there's variances to this. Were concerned with COVID and how their world would be with it, and how they would get ill or would not get ill. That's down to 26% now. From that process, things haven't changed for some people. People are still getting sick, and people are still dying from it. However, as our culture goes, our attention is elsewhere, and the numbers are now different, and they don't feel that it is dramatic, and people aren't getting as upset about it. So therefore, it is not as much newsworthiness, but it still has an impact. That being said, we're in an interesting budget time because now, for the first time in 3 years, we have to be better at what we've been anticipating for the year following. We had, as I said, a mea culpa last year of, oh, hey, look, we don't know what's next year. So we're just going to put a stick on the wall and throw a dartboard and just say, this is what we anticipate with all these variables that says it's not my fault if it's wrong. Because when it comes to budgeting process, it usually is somebody's responsibility if it isn't right. We've been out from underneath that umbrella for a couple of years now, and some people are new to the budgeting process. They have no reference point prior to them having started it last year or the year before to know what the world should be like when it comes to the budgeting process. As we refer to many times, budgeting history is usually based on 3 month segment of August, September, October. August is a collection of data, aggregation of historicals, actuals, things that we know about. From sales teams, it's a matter of recurrence of business. From marketing teams, it's an interpretation of data. From operations, it's a concern as to FF&E expenses, operational expenses, capital expenditures, labor, staffing, shortages, services, different things that go on for the building itself. And then from everybody else, it's a matter of how they fit into that puzzle piece. So we're now at a point that we're in the second month, September. And now it's the taking of the information that we have gathered, the historical data and so forth, our evaluation of our anticipations of what 2023 has on the books in the sense of repeat of business, demand changes, um, competitive set changes in the sense of new or established buildings or reopenings of some hotels that were closed during certain periods of time. All of that evaluation of gathering data has been done. Now it is the hard work of doing something with that data. And this comes into where we roll into today's topic, and that is SWOT analysis for 2023. SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, is a old school traditional rite of passage for all budgeting processes. It is a modality of discerning your place in your market as you compare them critically against others. Obviously, you're breaking down the categories of your perception of your competitive set based on on your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and the threats are the evaluation of your competitors. Now, I say that most of the data is related to information you have already available, which is what your entity of business is. However, you only have one letter out of that four-letter combination that is really related to your competitors' threats. Usually, the process of SWOT analysis is pretty much straight up. You do room count comparisons, brand comparison, common space and meeting facility comparisons, distances from certain particular points of value to your destination market, distance from the airport or distance to the event entertainment venues, proximity to what drives demand to your market. These are put into a quantitative way. If you are X miles away, you are um, this amount of common space or capability of space for your meetings and groups and gatherings. You're in proximity to, if you're an airport hotel, you have proximity and you have shuttle service. And then you take that same look at what you've done for yourself in the sense of just statistical data, and then use that template to your competitors. You look at your competitors and say, okay, fine. How are their rooms compared to ours? How is their meeting space compared to ours? Well, how is their proximity compared to ours? And you do this checkpoint to each other. One's a green square, which is good, and one's a red square, which is bad, whatever. And that develops what you look at as being opportunities, saying, we do this, they don't. We have this, they don't. And you start seeing what you see as leverageable means. Now, for those that are new to your property, this is a necessary component of a more integrated familiarization. This is sometimes some of your team members' first chance at seeing how your product, in logistical perspective, is compared to another product in market. But I want to expand the traditional concept of what SWOT analysis is to a more tangible value of what you need for 2023. Because the old way SWOT analysis was done, pardon the coffee, necessary component, was more based on a traditional modality of that hotel's in my market. I compete with that brick and mortar building over there. They are going for the same type of business coming into our market as I am. They're a competitor brand, or they are a brand and I'm not, or vice versa. Whatever it is, there was some very fundamental, this is my world, my ecosystem is my destination. We know that that is no longer the case. We know that there is a whole difference between who you compete with on market, online, and who do you compete with in market, tangibly brick and mortar. We also know that there are other industries that are bleeding off the demand to our market that we used to traditionally have. And I speak specifically about Airbnb, VRBO, and product like that, that now have a very strong foothold, but actually more than a foothold, a true presence in our market, that are under consideration for comparison. You can't compare the traditional SWOT analysis in the same terms that you used to historically against product like that in your evaluation of their threat to you, which is the one letter out of SWOT that is really related to your competitive set is, okay, what are they in comparison to us? So that old modality of I have 150 rooms and they have 135. Yeah, I got 15 more rooms to sell. Or I have 2,000 square foot of space and they have 1,000 square foot of space. Or I've gone under a recent brand update, they haven't. Those are all still good, but they don't have the same relevance that they used to have in their exclusion of any other consideration to what you're competing with. So now you have to expand what the SWOT analysis can offer you for data. For instance, going back to the Airbnb and VRBO conversation, you need to go over and get a product called AirDNA. AirDNA is a platform that evaluates for Airbnb owners um, what they should charge for rate, who's competing with them in the market. It's a tool meant to be used by Airbnb people that are trying to put their product on market to see what their market is doing, their demand cycles. And it's really fun to look at it because everything that is good for them is actually bad for us. It's an inversion. So when they have green indications like this is really good for us, this is high demand, you can charge higher rate on their calendar layout, it's actually going, oh, this is the time that they're competing most with us because of the demand to market. They're the unconstrained demand portion to our market. That has to be accounted for in your SWOT analysis. You have to realize that at a certain threshold of demand to your market, your yieldability value begins to diminish because more inventory is being placed into your market. So you can't demand and command the higher price because there is other resources of inventory that's being added to your market that wasn't there beforehand that will bleed that demand for your rate. So that has to be put into your SWOT analysis. That has to be a threat component in comparison to your overall strategy. Now, is that a tangible in-market competitor? Absolutely. But you can't compare yourself to the one-bedroom hotel or house that is offering a space that is stealing from you your one-room rental, because you can't compare your 150 rooms to their one. But you do have to look at how many of those one bedroom places in your market can dilute the demand to your 150 room hotel. So because of that, you have to adjust your SWOT is the point of that. The other is you have to also evaluate your online competitive set that has really nothing to do with your strengths and weaknesses in a traditional perspective. Traditionally, again, going back to this is my working common space area. This is my ancillary facilities. I have a restaurant, or I don't have a restaurant, seating capacity of the restaurant. I do or don't have spas and other services or what have you. This is my location value. Those are still valuable, but when it comes to online, that list of what is valuable and strengths to you turns into a larger competitive set. You have two strong competitive sets within online. You have your in market online competition, people trying to sell your product for you. Okay, we're talking about OTAs, we're talking about wholesalers, we're talking about all of those people that are selling the fact that they can sell your inventory. You're competing with them. That is technically in your market. But then you also have your outside of your market competitors. And what I mean by this is that you have to consider in your SWOT analysis what's called a symbiotic market. The best example I persistently give is I have hotels that were in Key West, and one of my strongest online competitors was actually Aspen and Vail, Colorado. And at first blush, you're like, well, wait a minute. First off, they're not physically in your market. So why would you be competing with them? Secondly, they're not even the same as your market. I can understand if they're looking for another beach destination or island destination, that there would be some symbiotic, like, okay, with the same similarities, kind of so forth. It's not. Because now in our SWOT analysis, we have to calculate for all the levels of how competition works against us and what competition we have. And in this case, it was symbiotic to the demographics of who enjoyed the resorts in Key West that I was representing. Because those same people that were looking to come to my resort would be the same said people that would be looking as an option of going to a mountain resort. They're looking at what type of thing. Now, it plays stronger to the marketing angle of this as to how do I get in front of them, how do I compete with them, and so forth. But from doing a SWOT analysis that you're in the middle of your budget program now for creating for 2023, you have to make concrete left or right turn decisions as to how these things are going to be addressed. Do you ignore them and stick your head in the sand and say, look, I can't fight a market that I'm not in? I will get the people that get to the point of that ZMA, zero moment of transaction, that they're going to purchase with me. They've gone through the consideration process of other destinations. They decided mine is the destination they're interested in. I'll just wait at my doorstep for them to show up. There's that perception. And it's not negative. Even as I painted it as a negative, it's not necessarily a bad decision. It's a matter of funds and availability and resources to do that. If you can't spend the money or you don't have the resources to properly tackle the competition strategy you need to do that, then you have to realize that you have to do what you are capable of doing. That's why we're in a budget process of saying, I can't throw that kind of money at that marketing. That competition is something I can't go up that far enough into the funnel and fight when they're in the discovery process of destination decisions before they become into the educated process. I can't be there. Or you might say, I might have to add more money to a platform that is there, like an OTA, like a CVB, TDC, someplace that is dedicated to driving business to your destination, where you say, you know what? I can't market myself by myself there, but I can add my voice to the platform that's responsible for our destination market. And I'll advertise the bejesus out of my chamber CVB TDC and make sure that I'm all over that site who's out actively pursuing people at that level. These are strategy decisions within your ZMA program of deciding with zero moment transaction, where do you want to sit in your strategy. But from a SWOT perspective, it's about making sure you understand it, identify it, know who these other symbiotic markets are that are competing with you, and then decide whether it is valuable or not as valuable to invest into compensating for what that means for you. That's part of the SWOT analysis. That was not part of our traditional SWOT analysis from days gone back. It's now a part of our new SWOT analysis. We need to understand who we're competing with online. Now, we've talked about two types of competitions online. Those people that are selling your product because they have the license to do so, the OTAs and wholesalers and so forth, affiliate programs as they are. You also have the fact that if you're a branded hotel, you're a product of the brand. So the brand, you have to understand what their perspective is of your product as to what are you in value for them. We know the bias that exists within brands. Brands sell to what people are interested in. The full flag resort property that's down the road from you gets a lot more attention as the pretty person compared to your small vanilla box brand that's not there. However, from a demand of price point and availability to your market, you're a much better deal and a much better perspective in market than that full flag resort might be. But brand will feature them when it comes to you're going to your destination. Oh, well, here's our bill because it makes more money for them because there's a higher rate for them. Yes, they say that they play fair, but in all honesty, they don't play fair. They play according to what it is the benefit to the brand. They're out to sell the brand. As we keep saying over and over, brand initiatives are for brand benefit. They're not there for your individual hotel benefit. You're a product of that. You're a result of that. You're a means to the end for them. Their ultimate market strategy is brand. Your marketing strategy is your hotel. Sounds the same, world's different. So, with that, in your SWOT analysis, you have to decide how much brand is your strength, how much brand is potentially an obstacle for you. It limits your capabilities. You don't have the ability to be as targeted with your marketing because you have to run with what brand gives you. There may not be something brand's doing for you. They offer solutions, but it may not be a solution that fits best for you. You might be having third parties that are doing some things for you. You have to weigh in the cost of what those things mean and the return on value for what they represent. That's a part of your SWOT analysis. And you may say, well, no, that's part of the budget process. The SWOT analysis is whether it's a strength or weakness for you to be a brand. It's a very calloused, candid look at yourself. Am I, by being a brand, a strength for me? Now, to pander up to people, of course, oh, well, of course, the owners made great decisions. The fact that no, the owners made the decision to be a brand because that's the only thing that could get them the finance to get the money to put the bricks on the ground. That is an unfortunate loop of cycle that our industry is at. That is the strength of the brand. Banks support brand because brand brings to them the metrics of contribution that gives the risk reduction to a bank to give you the money to build a hotel. It is very hard to impossible to build a new hotel without some sort of history of having built successful hotels prior, which usually is related to brand. So the fact that an independent hotel exists is because somebody has the financial fortitude to support their ability to get the credits they need to run the business. And if you're not understanding why credit is important, it's like, hey, we make good cash flow and so forth. Cash flow does not run at ebb and flows when it comes to expenses. Cash flow is sometimes below what you need as expenses, payroll, buying product, whatever have you. You might need to have what's called temporary funding, bank loan capability, to supplant your cash flow that goes up and down. Because of that, banks look at risk factors. Risk factors diminish with brand relationship. So, why is this going back to SWOT? Because you have to go out from underneath of the G boss, you're great, to a, being this certain flag brand, being in the area that has maybe brand saturation. Because, hey, look at the Marriott and Starwood blended together a few years ago. So now everybody's frenemies and together in the same platform. Doesn't help the fact that you are in a courtyard or you're in a Fairfield or something like this that used to be your dominant value to the market, but now you have frenemy brands that are also pursuing the same guests that are now part under the same umbrella. They see the same data that you see. You see their data. You're actively competing against them, both historically more so. Now you're supposed to be frenemies, but it's still a matter of how do you fill your hotel with rates and rooms. And this is a part of the SWOT analysis. You have to be genuinely honest with yourself as to what is a strong point for your hotel. Because when you start taking all the data you've accumulated last month in August to begin to use for this month, it's going to get one of the first filters of function, value, and usability is your SWOT. Is that a benefit to us from the information we have, or are we lacking in this? And this is almost where in a SWOT analysis, you have to do survey perspective. The danger is some of the people that are involved with your building of your budget now and through the process of developing SWOT may not have been on the team at the same time last year. We went through a massive change these past 2 years, dramatic industry change when it came to staffing. And either some people were elevated in roles because they were the last man standing and they were put into a role above them because it was cheaper for the company to do that, to kind of hold a place card, as it were. But now that person's in that role, but they've never done this type of work. They've never done a budget full blown, their responsibility, sign on the dotted line bottom budget. They've been a part of it in some aspect, like go fetch or find this or hand over this, but they've never been the one that aggregates it, reviews it, and decides to pitch it and get it validated. And this is new for them. But where's the training for that? Who trains that? If you're a brand hotel, there are RFP modules of like how this is how you submit for RFPs and this is how you do this. But there's nothing about budgets. There's alludes to like, okay, budgets are important for this or budgets do this, but there's no real practical way that people get trained unless the person that was in the chair before them or the chair above them spent the time with them to educate them beyond the level of their job to understand what they do. Unfortunately, with any industry, not just ours, the people above in the chair above you aren't as gratuitous as to their education. Now, I'm not endorsing that. Actually, I'm totally against that. That's poor leadership. That's just being a manager. Like, I'm going to preserve my job and not share with others what they need to know, in the fact that it would reduce my risk of being displaced by them. It's a lazy management practice. A good leadership is share and know. And that's where, that way you're building the culture of people that are going to eventually be in your role, if not your own role, because that allows you to move up. You can't go somewhere if you're leaving a void. That's good leadership perspective. So we're dealing with some people that may be very new to this process and they're searching for modality. What do I do? What I've heard about the budget, the dreaded budget season. Hospitality has a season for budget, and I understand that. Back in the day, I used to watch my boss and other similar peer level bosses disappear or be busy all the time or working late or grumpy or not engaged as much because they were totally focused on this budget process, but they were never part of the process. They may have been told to go fetch. They may understand that, oh, I need to go over and do a review of technology of the other hotel across the street. Like, I need to go over and see what they're doing and what space they have or something. The idea is that SWOT was not always a passed down process of understanding. There are some things that are offered out there that will go through the nomenclature of what SWOT means, what would fall under each of the categories. I think there's a couple of templates that are being offered out there as to fill this template in, and this will be a good SWOT start and so forth. But they're free, and you get what you pay for. Or they're obligatory because you have to deal or buy or have to go through a sales pitch about a process of a plan that was being offered in relationship to a SWOT analysis. Whatever it is, the value proposition is SWOT should be a organic creation of the property to be flexible enough to include the things that property is uniquely needing to face. There's a base template of SWOT, which is just what we said: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Okay. There is an expansion of the SWOT, which is the evaluation of all the non-defined conditions as to online markets and symbiotic competitors and what have you. And then there is the intangible aspect of SWOT that has to be put in. And that is the things that really do make a difference, but they are very intimate in their knowledge base. For instance, a revenue manager might have an opinion of a competitive property that is, they don't know how to rate themselves out of a wet paper bag with a sharp knife. They are all over the board. They're reactionary. Some of the biggest things that your revenue manager will tell you when you get gritty with them in the granular perspective of their competitive set is that they have opinions of each of the hotels that they are in their comp set of as to their rate strategy. They will flat out tell you which ones follow them, which ones they follow, which ones they think are bogus and uninformed, and other ones that are crafty as hell hack, and they're constantly an adversary to them in modality of demand and rate in composition of demand. They have a very unique perspective, and they should be a part of a SWOT analysis. But strangely enough, if you look at the purity of what SWOT has done historically, revenue managers, being a relatively new role from being a reservations manager from 25 years ago, okay, aren't necessarily in the component process of discovering strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. They might have some dialogue about it. They might talk about some historicals. They might share some data. They might contribute to answers, but they themselves aren't in an active decision role as to what should be put into these categories as they are being asked to supply content that we put in these categories. I find that that's a flaw. I think that we need to go over and make sure that our revenue managers are a part of our discussion so that they can give the insight of saying that property is reactionary to us. If we tone out our rates, they're going to tone out their rates below or above, depending upon what their strategy is in comparison to us. Or, you know what, I wouldn't trust that other property over there because they are conniving as heck. Just because they're offering low rate now, they're just building base business. They have a group block that's going to solidify it up, and then they're going to rack rate on the top of it after it's done. Or, you know what, they constantly will fence their weekends. They're going to do a mandatory Thursday check-in. So even though they're low rated for the weekend, we don't need to drop our rates against them because they got a fence on theirs, and people are going to come to us because we don't have a fence. Whatever that is, okay, that has to be a part of your analysis in your SWOT. That needs to be there because the value of a SWOT analysis goes beyond just the budget. This is the first constructive critique of your market for your team. Now, I want to branch out a little bit from the purity of SWOT and talk about leadership and your team. Um, when it comes to function and formation of the operational team, a housekeeper can be just a housekeeper. They're given a cart, they're given a list, they're given room count, and they're given the procedures to do what they need to do. They have no idea if the hotel is busy that day. They have no idea if the hotel is not busy that day. They have no idea if the hotel is ready to belly up because of lack of cash flow. They have no idea if there's a huge event that's going to make an impact on them, or there's a wedding that's coming in, because you're treating them as just a function. Here's your cart. You're on floor 12. You have rooms 220 to 230 today, and you got 10 checkouts, and off they go. And they're just going to make sure that they have their knowledge of saying how many rolls of toilet paper I got for what I need, and all the things that they know about the function of their job. They may be a great housekeeper, but they're not a great team member. And it's not because they can't be; it's because you haven't made them a good team member. Everybody this chance now during budget, and SWOT is one of the apexes of this. It's a chance to include everybody. And if you think it's like, Lauren, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard, I'm going to have a housekeeper do a SWOT analysis. No, you're going to know, they're going to make sure that the housekeeper knows what you're looking at. And this means by collaboration and communication, you're not going to burn jet fuel and have a meeting of 20 people in a room. All of them don't care. Just let me get back to my cart and do my rooms. You're not trying to force a square peg in the round hole. What you're doing is persistent education, persistent communication. We used to have a thing that I did, and I'm not the first and not the only. I'm not, and there's plenty of people that do it currently. We just used to call it NEPMA, which is nobody tells me anything. 8 a.m. every morning, we would have a meeting in the exec office, and a representative, not a manager, not a supervisor, was required, but a representative of each department had to be there on time as we reviewed the day's activities. Checkouts, arrivals, who's in house, who's not in house, what's expected, the issues, things. And no, we're not bearing our soul as to profitability, budgeting process, or whatever like this. We're simply making them aware of what that day looks like. The impact on that on your team is profound. One, they now understand what's going on around them. That expanded awareness makes it that they know there's an important group there's a large group. So when they see somebody in the hallway, rather than being the generic 5, 10, 20 rule and just be, now it's a matter of, hey, hello. Oh, and if they see a carnation or bouquet, oh, you're with the such and such wedding. World of difference. That's the functional logistic daily stuff that makes an impact. But here's the other stuff. When you're talking about it in front of them, budget season, and that we're at the process now where we're looking at what we're looking at for next year, you can solicit from people. It's like, hey, if you have any insights of things that you think we should consider, things that you persistently see, and this is where you get the engineers and the housekeepers say, oh, that room 220, man, that air conditioner will constantly piss on the carpet. It's never, ever worked right. It gets in the walls. It's a constant repair issue. Really, really, really would love it. If you're thinking about budget next year, you should replace that damn air conditioner. It sounds small, but unless you're looking at your logs, and unless you have a leaned into chief engineer that's reminding you the persistent issue that it represents, it'll get missed. Now, obviously, everything's balanced on capital expense and FF&E and so forth. But if it costs you money, it's really easy to get budgeting for, or easier to get budgeting for. But these aspects of your strengths, weaknesses, these are the things that add to making sure that there's always a constant awareness that's going on. Plus, you don't know who you're seeding in interest. That housekeeper that's more than a housekeeper might go over and say, oh, so that's what happens at this time. And right now they're getting, and maybe given a forum that they are in to be able to ask, well, what does SWOT mean? Or what kind of information would be helpful? You don't know what you're seeding in the future. That person might be your future vice president of whatever, because they are enjoying the industry. That's one thing that we've lost in our industry, is that we bemoan the fact that we've lost so many people because of the furloughs we put in force and the people looking for other jobs because we were shut down. But we've also lost the spark of what makes working in this industry so satisfying, the heart of the servant aspect of this. And I know this is a far venture from our SWOT discussion, but the reality is that this is a great teachable moment process. It doesn't resonate with everybody. Not everybody's going to be this enamored person that says, oh, please, I want to help any which way I can. Other people's like, just give me my cart and let me do my rooms. But what you're doing is by giving exposure and awareness to everyone of what everyone is doing and why they're doing it and what it is they're doing with it, then you might have amazing insight from people that you would never think would be a resource for you. And I say that very much about from my history as a general manager of the hotels. We used to have that walking, talking sessions. If anybody's familiar with the old TV show West Wing, um, they made it famous on TV to do that, but that was a living, working relationship we had in hotels. We're working the back halls, and it's like a beehive of people. We're walking down the hall, myself and maybe the other exec team members, and so MGM, and we're going through issues and problems of the day, banquet questions, so forth. And a houseman comes up, and they're following along with us. We're walking down the hallway, solving these things. All of a sudden, the houseman peeps up with a suggestion about a banquet thing. Now, under other circumstances, other people was like, "Who that? You're a houseman. You have no opinion about it. You don't work in this department. Wait your turn until we're done with ours, and you can ask whatever you want to after that." Never happened the case. Actually, it was always paused, like, "Hey, well, that's brilliant, great, thank you. And by the way, while you're here, what is it you came for?" That unique combination of skill, walking, talking, getting done, and making all departments equal. There was no wrong question, okay, and there was always great insights. Made anything possible in the work process. That same dynamic can exist with your SWOT. All too often, SWOT analysis is thrown to salespeople. Here you go. Tell me when it's done. Send it back. Ugh. Now I got to go through and make a checkbox program of every hotel. I got to either go there, I got to look them up. And believe me, it's way easier now than it used to be. You didn't get to go into an internet and say, how many rooms at the Hotel XYZ, and it would pop up. Or how much is a meeting space there? So you had to mask your voice. Hi, this is Laurent. I am looking to find a meeting room. How many square feet do you have? There was lots of ways we snuck around to go over and try to get the data that wasn't immediately available. Prized possessions with sales kits. Remember those sales kits that you would get from your competitors to see what they were featuring, what their menus looked like. First thing you do is rip those menus out and bring them to your chef. Hey, what anything in here? And let's do a breakdown on prices on this and see what they're making off of these things and everything. It used to be treasured secret information. It's like you had top secret stuff. That's a bad thing right now, right to say. Anyways, the idea was you looked at this stuff, and that's a part of your SWOT analysis. Is like, are their menu prices better or worse or same? Is their menu choices better or worse or same? Is their service levels? Are their review levels? This is a whole new thing for SWOT that we know about. How's our review level compared to our competitors? How do people perceive us in comparison to how they perceive our competitors? It's a valuable component because, as everybody knows, 1 star on a TripAdvisor difference between 3 and 4 can represent hundreds in ADR and millions in revenue. By the way, the fact that reviews are put into this funnel of decision making, these are part of your SWOT. Now, some newer SWOT templates have these things. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Some of the newer SWOT templates have these newer aspects, like what is your review score, what is their review score, what is their, and that's fine and it's useful. But here's the problem with SWOTs right now: they kind of live in the world of what used to be budget books. The ring binder stuff, where you did the budget book and it's pretty much you erased the last year's number on it, put your number on it, and then made variations of 4 to 7% based upon what you thought you could build or take away from costs. From that, okay, SWOT was put into the same folder. Oh yeah, we did our SWOT analysis. It's on that shelf over there. Or nowadays, it's on the computer. Just look under the shared folder, whatever. It's not an active, living, breathing document. It needs to be an active breathing document. It needs to be something that's constantly looked at. When you're looking at your progress of your occupancy and your revenues and your rates and so forth, you have to keep in your mind, beyond the revenue manager doing this, which they don't tend to keep that up. They forget. I wouldn't say forget. They begin to not be as thoughtful about the size comparison. Now, if it's dramatic size comparison, that hotel has 500 rooms, you're 150 rooms, that's always a notable. But if it's 150 versus 160 or 170, it's not as notable. If also too, and this goes through your SWOT analysis, if you're not breaking down your room comparisons by the types of rooms, you're missing a huge thing. You need to know your kings versus theirs, your doubles versus theirs, their connecting versus theirs, okay? Suites versus theirs, views versus views. That breakdown, that granular breakdown for your revenue management SWOT comparison is very critical, because when you're looking after you've done this process and this exercise, and a few months down the road where it's not in the front of your mind all the time, you need to be reminded that when you're looking at occupancies of a competitor and you're saying, why are they blocked so hard on that? Why do they have the extra, and you don't know of any group that from your research are finding there? Why are they on demand of it? And you go back to your SWOT and realize that they have a boat ton of doubles. And in market right now is a lot of sporting events. So they're going to get higher demand because of the doubles rooms allow them to sell for the kid teams and so forth easier than the fact that you have more king rooms. And that's not as equitable for the teams coming in. That usage of data is very critical, but it's often forgotten because after the SWOT's done, it's usually put on the shelf. It's done, it served its purpose of function. So unfortunately, a lot of hotels just check the box, did the SWOT, it's done, and they don't function with the data that they gather. Even for the hotels that do function with the data that they gather, okay, it's a remembrance of what that data represents. I'm always stuck with the fact that I'm looking, I'm scratching my head with client. I'm like, what is this? What? And you can't figure it out. And then you go and do your research of what do you think it is and and nothing's making any sense to it. And then you go to something like that, the Captain Obvious going, duh, they have twice as many double rooms as we do. And the sport teams are in. We can't get that business until they fill up because we're the last choice because of kings compared to them having a bunch of doubles. Sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes it's a lot harder. But the idea is the SWOT analysis has a higher value than just a function that check box off during the budget season. Really think about it. When was the last time you pulled your SWOT down outside of budget season? Very rarely, because it's not seen in the value context that it could be. Also, too, in your SWOT analysis for 2023 that you need to add into is the strategies of marketing that you've seen. Everybody should have their portion to the time capsule. Okay. You have the revenue managers talking about inventory segmentation types, thresholds of revenue, followers and leaders in your strategies, tier relationships as to how you're placed. Their data should be their contribution to the time capsule. Okay. Marketing needs to come in with how did these hotels perform historically compared to us in the sense of their marketing efforts? Do they have, and most marketers will know in their competitive set. Sorry, I got to drink more coffee. Sorry. They will know which hotels are great and which hotels they can poach business from at will if they had the budget to do so. They too, just like revenue managers, have a perspective on in-market competition. They know who they can beat on a regular basis, and those that they think are crafty little SOBs that can outperform them and are brilliant strategists. And damn, I wish I did that as well as they did, or had the budget they had, or whatever. But they know this information. That needs to get moved up into as their portion of the time capsule of the SWOT analysis. Just as much as sales needs to go and say, you know what, they hired XYZ over there. That person, I'm amazed they're still in the industry, whatever. Okay. They have a perspective of who their counterparts are that has relevance. Because if you know, man, that person is one crafty gun, that they are good. They or that person, you know what, that salesperson, they are inside track with that employer over in marketing. They used to work there. Their brother works there. Whatever it is, they will always get XYZ's company business because they are tight with them. There's nothing we can offer. There's no rates we can offer. There's no incentives we can offer. They will never not be wherever that person is. That's good to know. That's good for SWOT analysis because you need to understand that whenever that comes up in conversation after this exercise is done, saying, well, is there any chance that we can get some business from the XYZ company? No, not until that hotel fills up. After that hotel fills up, yeah, maybe there's a chance there's some bleed over and some compression from that, but we're not going to get first dibs on that. By the same token, we reverse of it from a sales perspective, their contribution to the time capsule, so to speak, is man, that XYZ company they just were not happy with that hotel last year. They got bumped, they got pushed, their blocks were diluted, they got charged cancellations, they got charged fees for lack of fulfillment, blah blah blah. They're looking for a new home. Good to know. Part of the sales strategy, which is the whole sales process or the budgeting process, what's recoverable next year, repeatable next year, and also what's attainable next year. That throws into one of those hoppers. We talked about that in episode 365, 66. Yeah, 365. Anyways, when we went through the sales process for this, the idea is that kind of information comes up to the time capsule. This is where the general manager has a key and pivotal role. We've talked about the dilution of revenue management's relationship with ownership in the sense the dilution of the GM's role with it, because the revenue manager having the first touch on data, owners tend to go to them when they have questions about that data, which is usually revenue related. The general manager is not necessarily always excluded, but they're not necessarily the first in line They hear about it as it's being asked sometimes. It used to be, whenever ownership or management teams came into the property, the general manager's office is where they went. And from there, they would go to the individual apartments to corresponding to their interest. That isn't the case as it has been. Nowadays, a lot of times there'll be a lot of active one-on-one dialogue between ownership and revenue managers. The GM may not even be included in until needed. I'm not a proponent of that. I think for somebody to effectively run, I've always made the promise to people that I've worked under in my process of growing up that everything I know, for you to make the decisions I need. Keeping things away from my superiors meant that they were not having a full information deck of what they're making a decision on, which means they make poor decisions because they're basing it on limited information. My job was to share with them what I knew, barring any confidences that were given to me. That's not a shared sentiment for a lot of places. A lot of times it's what is it for me? If I can keep a secret and it gets me an advancement, I'm not being negative to people, but that sometimes happen. But why I'm bringing it up now is because it can creep into SWOT. A lot of people politically in the organization within a hotel have aspirations of what they want to do, what chair they want to sit in, where they want to grow. And for that, sometimes the full everything I have available is being given isn't there because they want to be able to, quote unquote, as the sales team goes, sandbag. I told you I'd get you 100,000, but I get you 250,000 instead. Yes, you sandbagged me. You knew you were going to be able to possibly get 250,000, but you didn't want to commit to it, so you only told me you were going to do 100,000. Now, the GM's role right now, when it comes to SWOT and budget, is the orchestrator of conversations and a solicitor of focus. What do I mean by this? Revenue management in this role right now is a contributor. They have a function beyond just what they bring to the table. They have to implement and use the information for what their strategies are, but they're a part of the team. They're not leading the team. Marketing, again, part of the team, not leading the team. Sales, part of the team, not leading the team. Okay. Your chief engineer, okay, not leading it is part of it. He's coming with all of his wish lists and concerns and things to me to consider for capital improvement and or FF&E improvement or whatever it is. Okay. Accounting is there, part of the team. Awareness, cash flows, historical data, relevance to impact, all those things, part of the team. The general manager's critical role in the SWOT analysis is the orchestration of the data to the purpose of the SWOT, which is, do we have a clear perspective of our position in our market for everything that we're competing with, both in the destination market and those outside the destination market? Do we have a clarity of our business entity? And through that comes from asking the right questions, soliciting engagements for things that might not be directly like, well, why are you asking me that question? Is it the yes or no answer or whatever? Because perspective is a very critical component to SWOT. SWOT isn't just a function of checkboxes and comparative tables and data to data points. It's about how all of that information, when brought together, gives a perspective, a focal lens as to where you are as a business in your environment for business operations. What can you ask for rate if you haven't improved your product in the past X number of years? What can you ask for groups if you already have a lot of saturation of overcommitments in other areas because sales brought to your attention the heavy commitments that you were willing to take to get any business over 2022 that have rolled into 2023? Or the fact that right now, or has been in August especially, your RFP processes for brands, this is like a huge thing for sales teams, where you go through and you define your rates and inventory for all of the SOPs that are presented to the brand that your property is soliciting for or have been asked to solicit for. If you're an independent hotel, you've got to muscle your way into that conversation. You need to find out what companies are looking to come to your market for what times and what year, or not what year, but what month, so that you can be a part of that pitch process. RFP, request for proposal. How do I get in front of you? What is it that is going to entice you to consider me in your options of what you're needing to come when you come to market? That comes from your sales team. Sales teams knowing who or what companies are doing what. And the companies right now are under huge transition. We talked about it last year to this year, that this would be the first year that there's actually budgeted amounts of money in budgeted amounts. How's that? For people to go to conferences, to have meetings, to travel again, that there's corporate budgets for this. We had a very pessimistic view by Bill Gates 2020 that said 55% of all corporate business is gone. And he made the allotment that 35% business will never come back. That has been changed optimistically to being 14% of all previous to COVID corporate travel won't permanently come back. That's seeming to be true, but that doesn't mean there isn't surgences. This year represented surgences. We had the first year of open, high density group conferences in some markets. Very, very productive, very much in demand. Was a great boon. Just ask people in Orlando. When it comes to all these people coming in because they felt that they were safe enough to come in, and it wasn't the risk takers of last summer. Where it's like I just got to get out and I don't care what happens. This year, because of the diminishment of the threat, either perceived or real, um, was people that didn't go last summer now went this summer, which is why we had such great numbers this summer as well. But we also got great numbers for our conference attendance and corporate travel and business travel in general because it was opening up. So we had this surgence, and people saw this as, oh, well, it's all back. It's back because it's the first chance for it to be actually productively done. But there's still high thresholds for business travelers. They have to go through different approvals now. Can it be done in a technology way with Zoom or whatever have you? Does it really require you to travel to go there? How valuable is the expense of you being there to what you bring back from it? There's a higher threshold to this. It's not that they can't do it, it's whether or not it qualifies to be done. This has to be reflected in your SWOT analysis to the level of the businesses you know by name that you're looking at in your roster of 2023. Is there potential for this company? Great. What is their intrinsic policy on what they're expecting to have as travel? If you talk to their rep in the organization that's responsible for talking to you about it, they will overconflate what they're looking for to negotiate your prices and underperform in the fact of the reality of what they truly need. Not calling them out as liars. That's what they do. Just as much as we, in reverse, are downplaying their impact to us to keep the rate down, but knowingly are happy to get them because of the impact on the compression that they provide. Both are on the other side of the. It's a. I wouldn't say it's a game because it's real life, but it is the confluence of those conversations. Your sales team in the SWOT conversation have to be absolutely crystal clear, candid, no sandbagging, no. Oh, I'm chums and buddies with them. Oh, no problem. It's in the bag. No, no. What's in the bag is a it's a contract with ink on it. Okay, nowadays it's digital sign, but you know what I mean. That is when it's done. Until then, it could be done, and there's a confidence factor. Is it halfway there, or do you think you're done just waiting for them to finalize X, Y, Z, whatever it is? That realization discussion for your SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, is based on the fact that for budget, sales put these informations of potential business future. So where does the sales offering of the probability of these demands come in? Okay. Under opportunities. Okay. And also under threats, because your competitors know probably similar to what you know. They see opportunities similar to what you see, and they're looking at their advantages compared to your disadvantages, and as you are vice versa. The reality comes down to confidence factors of your sales team's relationships, your sales team's capability to close, and other intangibles, which come to, if we don't get this budget right, we're not going to get through the FF&E increases that we want, which jeopardizes the following businesses with us. If we don't swap out those air conditioners, in-room air conditioners, in that wing, we're not going to get this XYZ company or these other companies because they made it clear that that is a concern for them in comparison to the other hotel in our comp set that doesn't have that concern. They like us, they love our service, or they love our restaurant, whatever it is that's the catalyst for the communication with you. But in comparison, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats, that other hotel, if you don't do what you say you're going to do for FF&E improvement, will push their business over there. That's the reality of SWOT understanding, SWOT analysis, looking at how this information works best suited to fall into those four categories. I would say that traditional SWOT usage is still alive and well if it is conceived and used perpetually after it's been built, and for your budget process as well. But also the expansion of what SWOT means, candid understanding from the sales perspective as to the relationships with the companies that influence their input to the threats and opportunities, as well as marketing's perspective as to threats and opportunities. Those guys got a new website, or you know what, their brand has just launched this, or you know what, there's a whole new area. Like for instance, I have clients in St. Louis and so forth, and there's a lot of downtown stuff because of the renovation they did downtown. I'm making this as a blank example. It's changed the demand to the downtown market. It's no longer what it was because it's now something new. They've expanded the parks around by the arch, so forth and so on. They've opened up a lot more retail venues and so forth. It's not as barren or old or dated or not as centric as it used to be. It's much more so. There's much more demand market. But also what's happened in that market is that a lot of outlying suburbs have really infused themselves with developing a counterculture to the St. Louis market, okay, downtown that says downtown's great. Go please see the arch, go to the museum, do whatever you want. But it's not the only thing. We have this out here. And it has been built on things that there's now out here is by a huge sports center that they have. So all of the collegiate, high school, middle school, elementary school sporting events that the kids and the family travel with have a place to go to that has nothing to do about being downtown and the expense of being downtown or the concerns of being about downtown or the fact that there's distractions downtown or wherever. But St. Louis, because of its proximity to what they need and or travel into and out of, now this other expanded alternate market is a viable and sometimes in its own demand market, okay, that has to be adjusted for in a SWOT analysis because it didn't exist last year or the 2 years before or something. You just can't take the book off the shelf and say it's the same stuff. You have to modify how you are seen in the market and what your market is seen as. And that has to come from how marketing comes to the table and says, look, this is really going to make a difference in the demand. What used to be 100% of traffic to downtown is now 75%, and there's 15% over here and 10% over there. That has an impact on what you're doing for top line revenue calculations, which we talked about at length these past few weeks, is how does that affect what you do with demand? Because now your competitors in market, okay, are vying for the different portion of demand to your market. And then now in comparison to them, you have a new hotel that came online that wasn't there before. You have an old hotel that's finished refurbished where you were happy to not have them in market last year. Now they're back in market. You have a whole changing comp set. And you have to have a very strong, clear picture of all the components that go along with that comp set, not just the tangible room counts and common spaces, but in proximities, but also their team members' experience, their connections to companies and businesses that are tangible to you as well, and the strategy representation of their marketing, strategy representation of their operation, and mission statements of their ownerships. If the ownership is a REIT that just looks about revenue yield and what have you, you know that their service levels are going to be in question. That's a leverage technique. That's an opportunity for you. If their team or their ownership team is very hospitality focused and they're very much about their review scores and their service qualities and their guest engagements and so forth, that's a threat to you in comparison to however you face it, because those things are assets to their side, which makes them threats to you. That awareness, again, to go back on the other topic of leadership, is a shareable experience to your team. First, to those people that are directly and eminently engaged with it, the team members that are creating the data for you, the subordinates that are providing data requests and so forth, of making aware of what that data is being used for, that they understand, thank you for getting this information on that competitor. What we plan on doing with it is add it to this other stuff. Look how it compares to all this. Sharing that ability of understanding what they would be interested in stepping into is a huge value to you, even if they don't stay with you, because the memory of you being the one that gave them that data is what you are investing into hospitality. They go off to another hotel. You wish them well. You want to make sure that they're successful. You gave them the tools to be successful. You're proud of their success. It's not because you didn't get to utilize them the whole time. You're proud that you were able to touch their lives to do something more with it. That's a huge benefit to anything. Okay. Regardless if it's to your benefit of your hotel, it's a benefit to you and to them most importantly. With that also is to make sure that everybody is exposed to what this SWOT program and budget process is so they feel like they're a part of the team. If you're on an assembly line and you put the square peg in the square hole, okay, and that's all you do all day, when you go out and you look at the final product of whatever you contributed to, you don't just take credit as like, well, inside of that thing, underneath the dashboard over to the left-hand side is where I put the square thing in the square hole. No, you take credit for the whole thing. You say, look, that I helped build that. That's what I helped build. That's the feeling you're giving your team, okay, when they're successful. That housekeeper that even though they're not helping you with your SWOT analysis, because of their potential comment and or awareness of what you're doing, maybe they're the one that says, a friend of mine works at the XYZ hotel and they're having so many problems and blah, blah, blah. And you may think of this as, well, that's inside. It is. It is the way of understanding and getting perspective of your competitors, not creating a biasness to them, but an understanding of the challenges that your competitors are facing as well, and to know how that relates to you. Is that, I mean, it might actually invoke the fact that you're saying, you call up a friend that's over there and say, hey, dude, I know we're on the opposite sides of the street here, but I heard that you're having a housekeeping problem, and it's your people are getting burned out and you're losing. Is there a way we can help? We can do some crossover or something. Remember, we work in the same industry, and so these are the things that, because you're involving your team, then your team feels good because they went over and helped a competitor. And how much more nobler is that you're helping a person up off the ground that you were fighting with before or continue to fight with? You fight it on the terms that you fight, and you compete with the way you're competing. But as we've often said in marketing, I don't worry about my in-market competition until I'm being compared by those people in market. I'm worried about the people that our guests had to go through to get to us. All the other markets that are trying to steal their interest. All the other places that are trying to be something that we are that they're not. The platforms and the services that aren't brick and mortar. Those are the people I'm first worried about. If it gets down to a guest is looking to take a left or a right in my market, then the person across the street is my competitor. Until then, they're my frenemy. They're helping make sure that person is actually getting to that point where they're considering where to go in our market. Until then, okay, we're in collaboration. If an enemy of my friend, if a friend of my enemy is a friend, what is it now? Enemy, a friend of my enemy is an enemy of my enemy is a friend of mine. There it is. Wow, blank mark. Anyways, we are at that time. Thank you for letting me go off on different angles. Veronica, thank you for your comment. Marcy, and I'm sorry for those that I ignored on the other platforms that we're simulcasting on that it may have had comments. I will get back to anybody's comments via directly message on them if you want to leave your DM. Always, you can send me an email at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. I will answer as I do with everything, with the live show and the podcast. Thank you for everybody that's watching on TV today, Roku, Amazon, Google, Apple. We always appreciate everyone watching there. And of course, we will simulcast this show 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time for our APAC friends, even though we always have wonderful live participation with our friends in the APAC region. And 11:30 a.m. London time for our EU friends. We'll simulcast on Wednesday again for that as well. We're also going to be doing something new coming up, just as to let everyone. I'm going to start sending out the week beforehand a link that allows you to participate in our show. Some people don't like doing live connections with us. Some people just do text, which, Veronica, thank you again. But other people have a voice to something or an opinion about something. And so this, I use a platform called Rumble where it's a link that you can click and I go and say, hey, I have this question, or this is the topic. What do you have any feedback? And the first thing it asks you is can we quote you? Can we just refer to you? Or what permissions do you give us to use what you're about to give us? If it's a video that you give, then we can share the video. But these are just at least audio components to this that you can say, hey, I have an opinion about such and such. That will go out as a bit.ly to everyone on the platforms. We'll send it all out. We'll send it out in the notification of the show and what have you. So if you have something you would like to contribute to the show, knowing what the topic will be, but may not be able to make it, then by all means do that. Marcy, thank you. So with all of that, again, thank you everyone for your time. We are going to have a recap on our podcast, which I'm going to record right after I'm done talking here, where we're actually working to some tools on how to identify your comp sets online, how to do some of the SWOT analysis in a granular level, like how do I compare my hotel to this place or that place or these things structurally as to what kind of traffic do they get, what keywords do they show up for, what is their marketing, what is their ad spends, granular ways of breaking this down so that you can truly evaluate how you compare to your comp set in an online environment. So we're going to go through some of the tool usages on the podcast. And that one's only 20, 30 minutes on the podcast we do every week. So with that, thank you again for the privilege of your time. My name is Lauren. Marcy, Veronica, thanks for joining me on this chat and for everyone else on the other chats. And we'll catch up to you next week, Friday, 11:30 a.m. for show number 370. Until then, have a great weekend and happy Memorial Day for everyone in the U.S. Bye, all. Times more what the average person in their company gets paid. So to get to that rarefied air of opportunity, you have to have either been the most aggressive, the most talented, or the most sacrificial. How much did you do more so than somebody else that was competing for the same positions that you eventually